The Darkwood did not like visitors. Ancient firs stood like a tight wall, their branches woven into an impenetrable canopy that plunged the world beneath into perpetual twilight. The air was thick, smelling of damp rot and something coppery, like blood. Alex and Robert pushed through on a faint path, likely made by wild boars. They weren't tourists. They were searching for an abandoned geological survey site, a find that promised career advancement. But the map, printed from a shady website, had long since become a useless scrap of paper. "I told you we should have turned at the old windfall," Alex muttered, forcefully pushing a prickly spruce branch aside. "Well, I think we've been walking in circles for ages," Robert replied, checking his compass. The needle twitched nervously, pointing north one moment, then somewhere else the next. "There's some kind of anomaly here. Magnetic." The silence was the most oppressive part. There was no bird song, no chirping of insects, only their own breathing, and the crunch of branches underfoot disturbed the dead calm. Every so often, both of them caught a whisper, indistinct, slithering from the very depths of the thicket, as if something old and very angry was stirring in its sleep, disturbed by their intrusion. The twilight thickened into darkness. Water lapped at their feet. They had reached the edge of a treacherous swamp that, according to the map, shouldn't have been there. "Right, we're making camp," Robert decided, dropping his backpack. "Until morning." They managed to set up a tent and lit a pitiful, smoldering fire. The flames refused to catch properly, as if the darkness itself was smothering them. Alex went to gather more firewood and returned a minute later, pale and wide-eyed. I saw it," he whispered, grabbing Robert's jacket. "In the fog, a face." "What face? A deer? A bear?" "No," Alex's voice cracked into a squeal. A person's, but not right. The eye sockets were empty, and the mouth was stretched ear to ear, and it was grinning widely." Robert didn't have time to answer. The fire hissed and died as if doused by invisible water. They were plunged into absolute, thick, tangible darkness. And from that darkness, right next to Alex's ear, a whisper came. "Stay!" They panicked, scrambled into the tent, and zipped it shut. Their hearts hammered in their throats. A soft rustling sound came from outside. Something large and heavy dragged itself slowly past the nylon fabric, brushing against it. The tent wall bulged inward. They didn't sleep a wink. At dawn, in the grim, joyless light, they saw a footprint, a single imprint of a bare human foot, pressed into the moss, right at the tent's entrance. It was enormous, with long, twisted toes. They couldn't stay any longer. Abandoning everything but their backpacks, they ran. The forest seemed to come alive to hinder them. Roots snagged their feet. Branches lashed their faces like tentacles. And the whisper pursued them, falling behind one moment, catching up the next, moving from one ear to the other. "Mine. You are mine." They burst onto a narrow path overlooking a deep ravine. Robert was in the lead. Alex, looking back, was a couple of steps behind. And then from the thicket on the right, soundlessly, the shadow emerged. Something tall, shapeless, made of swirling smoke and clots of darkness. In place of a face, that same nightmare grin. It reached for Alex with a limb that looked more like a spear or a claw. "Alex, run." Alex lunged forward, but the shadow was faster. Its dark arm shot out, not to grab, but to sever. There was no sound of impact, only a dry, horrifying crunch, like dry branches snapping. Alex fell to the ground with a deafening scream. His right arm, from the elbow down, lay separately on the moss. There was no blood. The flesh and bone at the severance point were blackened and charred, as if cut by a beam of pure darkness. Robert, without a second thought, grabbed his friend by the jacket and dragged him, not letting him look back at his own severed limb. The shadow did not pursue. It remained standing at the edge of the path, and its soundless, satisfied laughter vibrated in their minds. Part 4. The Aftermath. Mad with pain and terror, they ran until the trees began to thin, and real sunlight broke through the branches. The whisper faded. The forest ended abruptly, and they tumbled out onto a rural dirt road. A farmer in an old Uaz Jeep picked them up and took them to the nearest hospital. Alex was in shock. Robert was in a stupor. At the hospital, after Alex was given painkillers and his stump was being treated, Robert went out for a smoke. His hands were shaking. He stared at the dark line of the forest on the horizon. He knew they were both forever tied to that place now. They had escaped, but the Darkwood had demanded its tribute. It took not a life, but a part of their flesh, a part of their souls. Robert understood this wasn't over. Something dark and sticky now lived inside them both. And he knew, one day the whisper would call them again, and this time it would not let go.